Hello, my name is Lee Taylor, and I really like to knit, so much so that some of my friends call me the Knitwit. I hope you enjoyed today's video and possibly even learned something. So let's get started. This week we have a few things to talk about. We're going to talk about swatches, and I'm actually going to do a swatch in the overhead so you can actually see what's going on rather than me just showing you a finished swatch. We're going to do a yarn dive, and I'm going to show you my finished object, which is Gnoah Gnewman. So there's not a whole lot to talk about this week, but there's a lot to show this week. So hopefully you enjoy. To start off, we will do the yarn dive. So we are going to use the orange here, and we will look at the overhead, and you'll get to get a glimpse at my favorite yarn that I own. So here we go. Okay, we're going to start off with one of my favorite yarns that I own in the orange section. It is incredibly squishy, and I just want to sit here and just squish and squish and squish. It's incredibly soft and pretty and fuzzy. It's got what's called a halo, which you can kind of see right there. It's where there's just extra fuzz to it. It is from Lang Yarns. It's Alpaca Socks, and that is spelled S-O-X-X, 4-ply superwash. It is 70% alpaca, 40% nylon. It is a fingering weight, which is the number 1. There is 100 grams in this, which gives you 426.5 yards. And the colorway is 1062.0059, which is very boring, so I just call it orange. And that is, like I said, one of my favorite yarns. Next we have a DK, and this is Lion Brand Trubu. As you can probably imagine, it is 100% rayon from bamboo. 100 grams gives you 241 yards, and the colorway is coral, and incredibly shiny and oh so soft. Next we have Big Twist Value Solid, 100% acrylic and an Aran weight. 170 grams gives you 330 yards in the colorway mustard, and it's a lot more orangish gold in person than it is on the yellow side. And last we have Big Twist Soft, 100% acrylic and an Aran weight. 170 grams of this gives you 320 yards in the colorway orange. Now I do want to correct. I said this was 170 grams and gives you 330 yards. That is not correct. It is 170 grams gives you 380 yards. Obviously this isn't the full thing. It's split up into multiple pieces. So here are all 4 of the yarns together, and I thoroughly enjoy these. This comes up a lot pinker than it is in person. It is definitely in the orange section. Next, in the overhead, we're going to do some swatching together. Very basic stitches. We're going to look at how to do a knit stitch, how to do a purl stitch, how to do a yarn over on the purl side, how to do a yarn over on the knit side, and then how to work those yarn overs when you get to the opposite side, and a very brief look at the long tail cast on. More of that in the future. So hopefully you'll learn something and grab some needles and knit along with me if you would like. Okay, we're going to talk about swatching basic stitches. So first of all, I'm going to use size 4.5 double pointed needles and a cake of yarn. It's an Aran weight. Color is linen. So first off, we just take our yarn and we come up and we make a slip knot like so. Put our needle on and cinch up that knot, not tight, just snug. And then I'm going to cast on 20 stitches using the long tail cast on method. It's the one that I use most often. It's stretchy, it's quick to work. The only downside is you have to know how much yarn for the tail you need before you get started. Some people will work from both ends of the yarn, the ball or cake, whichever you'd like to call it. And you're just working and putting on stitches. I'll do a demonstration of this slower later on. So let's count our stitches here. So we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. So we've now cast on our 20 stitches, and now we can begin doing our swatch. Now the swatch is used for a couple of different reasons. One is to practice the stitch that you're going to be using in your project. The second one is you can use it to measure and see if you're getting the correct gauge. Excuse me. And gauge is your stitches per inch as well as your rows per inch. That way you know you're knitting the correct size, and is incredibly important for fitted garments such as socks or mitts, hats, especially in sweaters. Now you may be 1 stitch off from gauge and think that's nothing to worry about. You know, it calls for 20 stitches in 4 inches and you've got 21. Well, over a which would be 5 stitches per inch. So over a, say, 20-inch item, and you're supposed to have 100 stitches, well, you've got quite a bit more. You've got, I'm not good with math, but the point is you've got extra stitches, and those extra stitches will add up. So if you've got an extra stitch every 4 inches, and you've got a whole nother 5, so you would have a total of 5 more stitches, which would be a whole other inch. So you're trying to knit something that's 20 inches, and you've got something that's 21 inches, which may not sound like it's really that bad, but a hat that's an inch larger is going to be very floppy and loose. And with hats, you want it to be nice and snug and tight. So that extra inch doesn't seem like it's so bad, but say you're knitting a sweater and you need it to be, say, 40 inches. Well, you're going to have something that's even baggier, and that's just side to side. That's not talking about the row count, which may make it a lot longer. So gauge is incredibly important and always something to check and swatch for. It's not a waste of time. You're learning, you're practicing, so your hands are getting used to doing what it needs to be doing, and you can reuse the yarn in your project. So it's not wasteful of either time nor materials. Now I'm just knitting a garter stitch, couple rows of garter stitch band for the swatch. But I will finish this row and then we will begin the actual swatch itself. So we're going to be swatching knit stitches, purl stitches, yarn overs on both the right side and the wrong side, and how to knit into those yarn overs on the opposite side. So just a few basic things. I will show you how to do those stitches. So first off, we are going to designate that this side here is the right side. So when the tail yarn is on the left hand, we know we're on the right side. Now you can put a marker on there if you would like, and a lot of times I do, but it won't necessarily be necessary in a few rows, and I'll show you why when we get to that. So this is going to be our first row where we do something different. So I'm going to knit 3 stitches on either end as a border, and then everything in between we're going to purl on this side. So I'll show you how to do the purl, and then when we switch around I'll show you how to do the knit. So we just do our 3 knit stitches. Okay, and now we purl. So when you purl, the yarn has to be in the front for almost every single style of purling. Now there are exceptions to every single rule, but this is the basic, and that's just what I'll just show you those. So what you do is you bring the yarn to the front. Now you don't do it this way, or that'll add a stitch. You bring it around the needles, bring it between the 2 needles. That will not create an extra stitch. So now this yarn, or this needle, is the working needle, and what you will do, let me zoom in here, make it a little easier to see. So we brought our yarn to the front, see that? Now we're going to go into the stitch from back to front through that first leg. So back to front, like so. Wrap the yarn counterclockwise around it, and then you've got to go back out the way you came. So now you're going front to back, and then slide it off with the other needle. That is, you have now purled. So we'll do that again. Back to front, through that front leg, wrap it counterclockwise, and then go back out the way you came, so front to back. And we're going to do that all the way across until we only have 3 stitches left on the needle. Now a lot of people say that the purl is the opposite of a knit, and that's somewhat true, but that's also a little bit misleading. You can't just look at a purl and kind of reverse engineer a knit, or vice versa, but it'll get you close. The reason why they say that is because if you purl on this side, the other side it's going to look like a knit stitch, and so that's why they say it's the opposite, but it is and it isn't, to make it complicated. So we're just purling our way across to the last 3 stitches. Almost there. Okay, so we're going to purl our last stitch. So again, yarn is in the front. I'm going to go back to front through this first leg, not this back leg, through this first leg here. Back to front, wrap the yarn counterclockwise, and go back out the way you came, so front to back. Okay, now I'm going to knit, so the yarn has to go in the back, because that's where yarn has to be for knitting. I'm sorry, I went off screen. And then we're going to knit these last 3 stitches. Okay, so now we turn our work, and we're back to the right side, and we know that because the tail is over here on the left hand side. So this row we are going to knit every stitch all the way across, and this is how you do that. You take the yarn and you make sure it's in the back, so behind the needle, and you go through this front leg, front to back, like that, so they cross, make an X. Okay, see how it's on that leg and not that leg. Okay, don't want to do that. You want to go between like that. Okay, wrap your yarn counterclockwise and pull out the way you went in, so back to front. Slide it off, and you have now knit a stitch. So again, yarn's in the back, go front to back through this leg here, counterclockwise, back out the way you came, so back to front. Okay, now I'm just going to knit all the way across, and I will join back in on the next row. Okay, now one thing I want to point out is, if you notice these stitches here, we're now working in stockinette, so you can see the little V. See if I can Come on, focus. There you go. See the little V there? So that means we're on stockinette. You're going to treat that the exact same. You're going to go through that front leg, wrap it counterclockwise, and back out. So whether it's stockinette or garter, you always do your knit stitch the exact same. Okay, I'm knitting my last 2 stitches. And now we're ready to turn our work back around. And you can, again, you can see we are making stockinette right here. Here, and it's flanked by this garter border. So we're going to turn our work. We're going to knit these first 3 stitches. Okay, and now we bring the yarn to the front and we're going to purl. Now we're going to purl a few stitches and then we're going to do a yarn over, which increases 1 stitch and is one of the easiest increases to do. Okay, so let's make a yarn over right here. So we purled 4 stitches. And you can tell that because there's a purl bump right underneath the needle. See that purl bump right underneath, and then over here you see there's a little gap. Those are knits, those are purls. So we're going to make a yarn over. Now to do a yarn over on a purl side, you know, the yarn's in front, you're going to wrap around the working needle counterclockwise, okay, just like you were making a stitch. Okay, and then we're going to purl a few stitches. Let's say here, and let's make another yarn over. So yarn's in front, go around the working needle counterclockwise, just like you were wrapping for a stitch, just like that. And you've now made a yarn over, and let's purl over a bit. Let's see here. 3. Let's knit and make 1 more yarn over here. Okay, so see we're 4 stitches before our border stitches, which is how we did a yarn over here. So let's make a yarn over. So we're just going to wrap around and purl to the end here. So we've increased 3 stitches. So we should have 23 stitches on our working needle when this row is complete. Now switch back to a knit for these final 3, and then we will count our stitches. Okay, so here we have all of our stitches. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23. So we have 23 on there. We started with 20, we made 3 increases. So now I will show you how to work into that yarn over on the opposite side. Okay, so we're going to knit across because this is the right side and we knit on the right side. So let's knit until we get to that first yarn over. So we're knitting right along. Just did our border. We should have 4 stitches and then a yarn over. And you can put a marker at the edge of your border if you want to, so that way you know when you get to it on the wrong side that you need to switch over. But especially if your memory is not as good, and I usually do 2 on swatches, but for this I did not. So here we are at the yarn over, and you can tell because this looks funky. The legs coming over, there's a big hole underneath, and that is all part of the process. So what you'll do to work this is you have 2 options. The first option will keep that a hole. The second one will close that off. So it twists it. So first, this stitch here, we're going to work like you would a regular one. So you just come in just like it's a regular knit stitch and knit that. Okay. And it looks weird, but it's going to be fine. So now let's knit to the next yarn over. And we'll see it when it comes up. Okay. That stitch. And look, we're back at a yarn over. So this one we're going to knit so that way it twists and closes that hole up, because in this spot we don't want a hole. So to twist it, instead of knitting through this first leg like we normally would, we're going to take our working needle through this back leg right here. Okay, so we're going to come in like that. Okay, and knit just like normal and come back out the way you came. Now that twists that yarn over, and we'll see what that looks like when we get to the end of our row. We'll come back to that. So now we knit over to the next yarn over. Okay, and here we go. This one we're going to leave open like on the other one, so we're going to form a bit of symmetry here. So through this front leg, just like normal, treat it like any other regular stitch, and we're going to knit all the way across. And then we'll see what this looks like. Yarn overs are very easy to do. They're easy to add accidentally if you're not paying attention, especially when moving from a knit to a purl. Because if it was in the back like this and you brought it, and if you brought it over like this to knit and then went into a purl, that would create a yarn over. So we don't want to do that. Just leave it like we would normal. Okay, so now let's look and see what it is that we've made here. Okay. Okay, so here we see a yarn over because it's got a hole like we want. Over here we see a hole like we want. But this yarn over here in the middle, there's a little tiny hole, but can you see how that stitch right there has a twist, looks like an X rather than a V over that little hole? That is a twisted yarn over. So that it kind of closes that up, and so then you don't see those lacy parts. It's still there, it's still a small hole, but it's not noticeable. Okay. I'm going to work this back row right here, purl, and then on the knit side, I'll show you how to make a yarn over on the knit side. Okay, we're back on the knit side, and I'll show you how to make a yarn over. So we're just going to knit over a few stitches, just like we did on the other one. We're going to knit over 3 stitches for the border, and then we're going to knit over 4 stitches from that, and then we'll do our yarn over. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. So now we're going to make a yarn over on the knit side. And it's just as easy as it is on the purl side. So the yarn's in the back. We're just going to wrap around like a regular stitch and then just keep knitting. Just like regular. And that makes a yarn over right there. So we'll knit across a few stitches. And let's make another yarn over. So right here, I'm going to just take the yarn and wrap it around like you would a regular stitch, and then continue knitting. And then we're going to knit until we're 7 stitches from the end, and then make a yarn over. So there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we need to work this last one right here. Okay, and now we add a yarn over. So we just wrap around like we would a regular stitch around our working needle, and then knit through the end. And let's see what that looks like when we get done with this side. Try kind of stay in the frame, but that's a little tricky at this angle. Okay. So here we have our work. You can see the yarn overs and the one we twisted. You can't really see the new yarn overs yet, but you will when we work this other one. So I'm going to purl this back row, and then we'll look at the yarn overs. Okay, I was purling across, and then I realized I have to show you how to purl into a yarn over. So we're knitting across till our yarn over, and there it is. Okay, it's the stitch that looks funky, and it's got that great big hole under it. So again, you can knit it regular, or you can come through and knit it through the back loop. So you would come in like that if you wanted to twist it. We do not want to twist this one, so we just want to purl it like you would regularly. Now you can knit that stitch instead if you wanted to. If you wanted to knit instead of purl it, that would be perfectly fine. And what we'll do is this next yarn over, that's what we'll do. We'll knit into that next yarn over. So, okay, we're at our yarn over, so we're going to knit into it, so we have to bring the yarn to the back between the two needles. And now we just want to knit that yarn over like regular, like so. Now we're going to take the yarn back to the front and purl over to the next yarn over. There's lots of options, a lot of ways of doing things, and of course you'll want to follow the pattern, but you can do what the technique that works best for you, because it is your knitting. If you wanted to twist all of your yarn overs instead of knit them to where they stay open for a pattern, you can do that. You just have to be aware that it's not going to have these nice pretty holes and look lacy. It's going to have those little tiny yarn over with the little X's. So you can do it. You just have to be aware that it's going to wind up differently than the pattern states. So here we are at our next yarn over, and we're just going to purl that like it was any other stitch. We'll work across, and then we'll see what our yarn overs look like on the other side of the work. Okay, 3 to the end, so now I need to knit these last 3 to keep the border. Okay, let's see what we've got here. Okay, see, we have our 3 holes, but if you notice on here, spread these out a bit. Okay, see how those are open all the way? All the way? And this one right here has a little cap. That's because we knit that yarn over. Whereas that one, we purled into it. So that knitting into it shrinks it up a little bit, and because it adds that little cap, that little purl bump on this side. Nothing wrong with that. It just gives it a different look. So that is how you do the purl stitch, the knit stitch, a yarn over on a purl side, and how you work it on a knit side, and then a yarn over on the knit side, and how you work it on the purl side. So there is swatching basic stitches. In this section, I want to talk about Gnoah Gnewman. I'm going to do a bit of talking face-to-face, and then we'll switch over to the overhead to look at some in-depth stuff. I do have all of my stuff written down, so if I glance down, it's just to make sure that I'm giving you all the information that I have. I knit Gnoah on a 4.5 millimeter and a 4 millimeter. It took approximately 75 yards and 4 days to knit. If I crammed it in, I could probably do it in 2 days, but there's really no reason to do that. I don't want to get burnt out on gnomes by the first gnome. The colors are light gray, pepper.com, linen, and bone. It is the gnome for January, and now I'd like to tell you a bit about the project. So in my little mythology that I'm doing along with these gnomes. The Gnewman clan has its own magazine that features articles and family favorite recipes. This year they decided to do a overall project called Gnomes of the Year. And they decided that they would pick 12 gnomes that are prominent in the family and do a little bit of backstory about them, some features, maybe a favorite recipe of theirs. So the overall project of that magazine is Gnomes of the Year, and then each month will focus on a particular gnome, and that will be known as the Gnome of the Month. So the Gnome of the Month is, of course, Gnoah Gnewman, and he is special because he is, first off, the founder of the clan Gnewman. Second off, he was the first gnome to move from Scotland to the US. He came over on a cargo ship in 1888, and like I said, he founded the Gnewman clan. The history is not exactly clear if he founded it in Scotland or if he founded it when he got here, but either way, he is the founder of the clan Gnewman, and so it made sense that he would be featured in January's Gnome of the Month. So here is Gnoah Gnewman without any further ado. I went ahead and knit through the rest of the hat. I've got it ready so I can pick up stitches. So I have already picked up the stitches. Since this isn't exactly a tutorial, I'm just showing you what I have done to move on to the next stage. So now I am ready to join in the new color. And this color black is pepper.com. Okay, so I simply get my new needle and my yarn section that I want to start at, and I think I want this needle right here to be my first, or my start of round. So I'm just going to put a clip there so that way I know when I get back to this needle I am starting the new round, because you work in a spiral and so it's hard to see when your first round is. So, and the way I pick these up, I actually have to knit into the back for the first round. And I'm just going to lay my yarn up here, try and stay on screen. This is tricky to do sometimes. And I'm just going to go around and pick up and knit all of these stitches, making sure to only work with the working yarn, which is the one attached to the cake, not the yarn tail. I have done that before, and then you got to rip everything out and redo, and it's just not a whole lot of fun. So I just wanted to show you what part I'm on now. And after I get this done here, I will start knitting the body, and I will check back in after I get all these stitches knit and repositioned like they're supposed to be. So I will see you in a bit. Okay, I'm here at the last 3 stitches, so I'm just going to knit these as I would normally, and then I will be back, as you will see, at the needle that marks my beginning of round. So I'm just going to keep knitting 2 plain rounds and then an increase round, and keep going until I get the body as wide around as I want, and then I'll start working decreases going the other direction. Okay, I'm just going to gloss over Gnoah. His hat is, the color is light gray. The body, or what I usually call the butt, is pepper.com. The beard is linen, and the nose color is bone. So this is Gnoah Gnewman. And I just wanted to show a little bit up close. You can see the increase. You can actually see some of the detail in this one. I don't know if that shows up at all. It's really hard to see anything on the black. You may be able to see there, and then it's under the beard, so there. And then of course, the underside. It took 12 marbles as the weight. That seemed like a good number. I mean, the weight was okay. I probably didn't need them because they're just going to sit on the shelf. But I went ahead and did the marbles, and went ahead and did 12 because, you know, there's 12 months in a year. There's going to be 12 gnomes. It just made sense to do 12 marbles. So that is Gnoah up close and personal. We can flip the brim back, and you can see the nose. You can flip the nose back, and you can see all the beard. But hopefully now you can actually see what the gnomes are going to look like. So each month the hat and the butt color will be different, but the nose and the beard will always be the same colors. So there's Gnoah. We will end our video this week with a look at the 4 different ways that you can buy yarn. They're called put-ups, and it's a way of selling yarn so it's not all in this big old wad of fibers, but a easy way to sell it and deliver it and bring it home and store it. So hopefully this will shed some light on some of the terms that I've talked about in previous videos, as well as videos to come. Okay, in the overview we talked about the 4 different put-ups of yarn. Now I want to show you a little bit more in depth. So here we have, let me zoom out a bit, move my light here. Okay, here we have what's called a hank of yarn. It's a way that you normally, when you go to a yarn shop and you buy more of a, not necessarily a specialty yarn, but something that's not exactly acrylic, we'll say. This is, a lot of times, is how it's sold. It's pretty, it's easy to store. You get to actually see if there's any color change. For example, in this variegated hank, you can actually see all of the colors along with it, and that's a lot easier to see in a hank. The downside of a hank is that you cannot knit from this form. Even if you untwist it and have a loop, it's going to tangle and it's going to make a rat nest, or what's sometimes called yarn barf. Usually not necessarily talked about in this, but in other forms, which you'll see here in just a bit. So to work a hank, you have to wind it into another form. This put-up will not let you work directly from it. So that's when you would use a swift and a ball winder. So this is what is a hank, one of a very common put-ups to sell. and store. Next, we have the more common, a skein of yarn. This is how you buy it in a store. You can knit from this. You can pull from the center or you can knit from the outside of it. You don't need to do anything to this. You can leave the label on. You can just pull the yarn straight out and start knitting it. There's nothing else you have to do with it. So this is a very convenient way of selling yarn. Also, the most popular form. Next, we have a cake of yarn, which is how I store all of my yarns, because it's ready to go and I don't have to do anything else with it, and it's easier to store because then you can stack up and you don't have to worry about them falling and sliding off like you do with a skein. So this is a cake, and when I use my ball winder, it actually makes a cake of yarn, and it's called a cake because it looks like a little cake. You can knit from the inside or the outside. That's entirely personal choice. I do like to pull from the inside, but that does cause issues because since you're working from the inside, you know this hole's going to get bigger and bigger and it can collapse. So if you have to move it a lot, you can just put this in a little bowl, or just knit from the outside, and then you don't have to worry about that. But like I said, I prefer from the inside. Last, we have a ball of yarn, and I've got this just held closed or held together with a rubber band so the tail doesn't wind off. But when you think of grandmother's knitting, this is probably what you think of. It's a ball of yarn that's in the bowl or on the ground, and you can only work from the outside, obviously. And when it rolls around and then the cats come and jump and play with it. Ball of yarn. This is very iconoclastic for all things knitting and even crochet. I know I talk mostly about knitting because that's what I do, but all of these can be used for crochet as well. There are tools that you can use, that you can buy to work the ball and the cake. It's called a yarn spindle, and I do have one of those, and I will get that and show you what that looks like. Okay, so here is the yarn spindle, and it comes in two pieces. And what you do is you take your cake of yarn after you've wound it. This is a cotton. And see that little hole? You put the spindle through that hole like that. Okay? And that holds it on there. And then you put that on the pedestal like so. And then you take the outside and you can knit from it, and it just unwinds as you knit, and then you can knit from the outside and not have to worry about this. I obviously have one of these. I don't care for it. I don't know if it's just this one. It's a little rough, but also sometimes when you're pulling on it, it will catch or hop off and just wrap around the top of the spindle and not actually pull, so then you have to go and unloosen it. So I just find it a little bit more cumbersome. But I do like it for decorative purposes. I don't remember what the wood of this is, but I always think of like an olive wood when I think of this. So this is a yarn spindle that you use to knit from the outside of a cake of yarn. So those are the 4 put-ups for yarn. Once again, we have the ball, we have the cake, we have the skein, and we have the hank. All 4 different put-ups to store your yarn.